Yeah, that's the play, because I did the same thing with Keith the Cop. He's my producer for my show, and he's a retired NYPD lieutenant, and so he's got all the time in the world. And I tell him all the time, hey, put that on eBay, and you keep 10%, 20%, whatever it is. And I've sold so many things. When I was fired but still getting paid under my contract for 2 years, I got into all kinds of hobbies that ended the second I got a job.
Really?
And all that shit went on eBay. Radio control, helicopters. This is before quadcopters and drones, whatever you want to call them these days. But this was like real helicopters that you had to learn how to fly. They weren't autonomous at that time. It was really hard to do. I bought ones that had literally jet engines, like those little jet engines. And it would say, you'd fire it up. It smelled like LaGuardia Airport and just sounded, it was loud, and I loved it. And then they all just became paperweights. Everything becomes a paperweight.
It was the early 2000s that you guys got let go first time, and you were still making. So you just pretty much just got into a bunch of random shit and immediately forgot about it when you got hired.
Yeah, that was
just a bunch of trash sitting around.
I had so much time to do nothing, and I was getting paid. It was the most lucrative contract we signed as the Opie and Anthony show. And then after 1 year of a 3-year deal, they fired us, but yet still paid us for the 2 years.
Yeah.
But said we couldn't work.
So what was that
held
like?
us to our deal. It was the greatest. It wasn't
stressful. It didn't hurt your feelings. You were just thrilled.
I was the only thing that upset me and Opie was the fact that we couldn't work. And in broadcasting, especially at that time, there wasn't podcasting and anything. If you were out of the game, you had to worry about being forgotten. And then, after the 2 years, you might come back and no one wanted you. Thank God we had satellite radio to go to at the time. But for those 2 years, dude, it was going down to Atlantis, gambling, buying anything I wanted. It was just a crazy time. And I paid for it because it was just like smoking, drinking, sitting, playing video games, gambling. I think I aged 15, 20 years in that in that 2 years.
This is fascinating to me. Emotionally, were you like in a down place compensating or just living your perfect life? Like,
it was both. It was, for a moment, the trouble is no matter where you are, you're still there. You're there. So I always had that kind of feeling like, oh shit, am I ever going to work again? Because, you have a couple have sex at St. Pat's Cathedral. No one really wants you after that.
Yeah.
So,
didn't you have thoughts where you were like, damn, in 2 years, I might have to be an HVAC guy again?
Oh, God. No, they had paid us plenty. That wasn't even an option.
I'll own the truck this time around, at least.
Thank God.
When I was in prison, I was looking for anything and everything to read because that's how I wanted to spend my time. I don't want to get mixed up with the rough crowd in there or raped. So I spent all of my time reading. I read maybe a dozen books, and I would talk on the prison phone occasionally to various people in my life. And one of them was Chiz, the guy who runs like the background of the show. And I was like, yeah, any books that you think would be good, fucking send them to me. They'll search them for contraband, and then I'll get them a day later.
Dude, if you would have been in that prison for 2 more months, it would have been like, yeah, that's Kyle, but they call him the professor.
Pretty much.
Man, so you want to know about Harry Potter?
I read the whole Harry Potter series. I'm not going to lie, all the way through. It took me a week. But he sent me your book, and I hadn't read it previously. I burnt through it in maybe 3 days or something like that, 2 or 3 days. I fucking loved it.
Oh, great, man.
Your book is awesome. Whenever we do Audible reads, I often recommend your book. I've been permanently canceled, right?
Permanently suspended. I had to record the whole thing, audio for the audiobook. It's a lot harder than you'd think. When you're talking, you just talk, but you don't notice every little mistake you make as you're just having an or an or something. But when you do that, you can't really have those pauses like that. That would be not good. Yeah. So I had to do it. And then I realized I could drink a few beers and really be good. And then one beer later and you're terrible.
Fine line.
Like anything, bowling, darts.
Tightrope. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to hit that curve. It's perfect.
Was it hard to stay still? Do you want to go?
Yeah, I want to say one of my favorite parts of the book, and I think this goes back to when you were during that 2-year period where you couldn't work. Maybe you went to a resort or to a vacation or something with a lady, and you stayed like a week or two, and she was like, "Wow, that was great." And you like get downstairs with your bags, you're ready to leave, and you're like, "Wait a fucking minute, why the fuck would I go home? You know what? Roll it back. Let's do another couple weeks."
Yeah, it was 2 weeks in Atlantis, down in the Bahamas. And yeah, just wheeling out, checking out. I was literally checking out and then thinking like, what am I going home to? You know, you start thinking, you get on the plane, you go home, you land, you drive back to the house, and then like go, yeah, I'm thinking of all that, thinking, why am I doing this? And then I just told the person at the desk, can I get another 2 weeks here? They said, yeah. I was like, all right, bags back upstairs. A month in Atlanta. It was amazing.
A month. My favorite part. My favorite part of the book. My favorite part of the book is when your mother sends you to go stay with your dad for a few months.
Oh yeah.
And when it's time to come back, I don't remember where you're coming back from. It's like you're coming from like Southern California to maybe New Jersey, right?
To New York. Yeah.
To New York. Long trip. So your mom sends enough money for a bus ticket, like
a plane ticket. No, my mom sent 2 actual plane tickets. She said, "Here it is, 2 plane tickets for me and my brother to go from." My father cashed in the plane tickets, bought 2 Greyhound bus tickets, and shoved us on a bus from LA to New York City. And it was a traumatic trip. Yeah, we wound up right off the bus in New York City because this was 1978, something like that. And right off the bus, we got arrested for being runaways. They thought we were going to be, 10 minutes later. Oh, I just came from New York. And they thought we were going to be child prostitutes or something. And yeah, my mom was pissed. But my dad had to, he had to buy some big jumbo Budweisers.
Well, that's understandable.
Well, you told
he
somebody
did get you laid though, which I thought like I was weighing the two, right? Like dad got you laid, but at the same time, he sent you on that hellacious bus trip with like $10 to your name.
I think it was always man training. Like my dad would always put me in man training because I think his biggest fear in life was any one of his sons becoming a homosexual. He was like, it couldn't be dealt with. So it was constant man training. I mean, I was 13 years old. He shoved a gun in my hand and got me up on a horse with a scabbard and a 30-30 Winchester, like old school. I was like the rifleman. And yeah, oh yeah. And I had a Ruger 1022 pistol on my hip, tied low like Han Solo. It was awesome. And that was my whole life. Was like, stop. If I cried about anything, it'd be like, knock it off, pissy eyes. and I love dropping the F-bomb, which nowadays, you can't use that. But the F-bomb for gay people. And that was his whole thing with me. So I think him sending us on a bus across country was another way of just man up.
Him calling you pissy eyes is one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yeah, your father might have liked my mom.
My dad was like, he thought it was the Old West. When we grew up I grew up in San Juan Capistrano, California with him. That's how I spent my early teen years when I left New York. And he thought it was 1850. Like he really had that in his head. I got a cramp in my leg once and screamed bloody murder. And he looked at me and he's like, next time you scream like that, you better have an arrow in your chest. That's not going to happen.
My mom wasn't.
When am I? Dad, engines.
What was that, Dick?
What did he do during the day? Was he like a frontiersman or like an accountant or something like that with all this?
He started out as an investigator in New York. He was a private investigator for an insurance company.
That's such a sketchy job.
It's so sketchy. It was like, and I loved it as a kid because I'm like, my daddy's Mannix. I thought it was like that. But then he went out to California because I think he wasn't allowed in New York anymore. So he went out to California and just became a cowboy. Like he wanted to be a cowboy. And he got this job as a caretaker of a huge ranch where he lived on it and had to make sure that the fences were mended for the cattle and all that stuff. And when I went out there to visit him, he shoved the cowboy hat on my head, boots on my feet, threw me on a horse and said, "You're a cowboy." And I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And as a kid, it's so exciting. And you're just shooting guns off a horseback. Who wouldn't love that? But the irresponsibility of my father was second to none. And eventually, even I figured that out and said, I better get my ass back to New York and do something with my life.
And he hooked you up with a cowgirl named Buzz, who was much older than you, that would fuck you to lose your virginity when you were
I
young,
don't even know if we could talk about the age difference. I mean,
Well,
you think Anthony's girlfriend is young compared to him?
I do think that, yes.
Well, she was 19. I was in my lower than her teens, let's just say.
Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. That's why I'm leaving it at
He
that.
wrote a book about this.
But, yeah. She was quite the trooper. She was a good,
Were you
very
13,
70s.
Anthony? I mean, hypothetically. Were you
What's that?
13, hypothetically? What's this number?
Hypothetically, let's just say I was a teen, but you couldn't go one way and still be a teen in the number scale.
That could mean anything. We'll leave it there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Wow.
awesome. Like it was great. And I wasn't one of these dumb kids like you see these days when they get their teacher in trouble. I didn't say a word. I shut my mouth.
That's right. Those fucking rats ruining it for everyone else.
Tattletales.
You got a good
Tattletales.
slutty PE teacher. You shut the fuck up and have some
Shut
fun.
up.
Yeah, share the love.
Shut
Let
up.
some other guys get in.
Yeah, why are you destroying her career as a great educator?
Yeah. Educating you.
Yeah.
It's like you found a unicorn in your neighborhood and you
Yeah.
fucking slaughtered it to take
You're
the
a
horn.
moron.
I went to two
We all
guys in
could have
my
ridden
high
the
school
unicorn.
who did that. They both fucked this older woman, somebody's mom, and not older, but call like 30, but they're in high school. So to us,
Too
she's
old.
older. Yeah, right. Rotten for 5 years now. And they called themselves gladiators. And they would be like, yeah, we're getting off like gladiators. And what they're talking about is how after school they're going to fuck this woman. But
Wow.
she never got in trouble. They never gave up her name. I don't know who she is to this day. It's aged out now, I presume. And they got laid a lot, and I did not.
Hillary
Oh.
Clinton. That was Hillary Clinton.
That was Carol Baskin, common mistake.
No, but